In April 2003, the US military made a startling discovery whilst searching what remained of Iraq's Olympic headquarters in East Baghdad. An American-led coalition had just invaded Iraq on the pretense of what turned out to be mythical weapons of mass destruction. Now, they were on the hunt for the toppled dictator Saddam Hussein and his allies. To try to justify what many around the world saw as an unjust invasion, the US Defense Intelligence Agency produced a now infamous pack of 52 playing cards, each corresponding to a most wanted figure within Saddam's inner circle. Saddam was the trump card, the ace of spades. His youngest son and presumed political heir, Hussein, was next, the ace of diamonds. And number 3 in the pack was Saddam's firstborn, most troubled and most sadistic son, Uday Hussein, the ace of hearts. Uday was a sexual sadist, drug addict, and psychopath. But he was also the man in charge of Iraqi sport, especially Iraqi football, which he ran using torture, theft, extortion, and murder. And so, when the US military arrived at Iraq's Olympic HQ, looking for the Ace of Hearts, they made a gruesome discovery: a medieval torture chamber that included a rack, an Iron Maiden, and a contraption made from wire bed frames used to electrocute anyone unlucky enough to be sandwiched inside of it. His calling cards were everywhere, but Uday Hussein was long gone. He knew that he was being groomed for power at a young age. He was smart, but not academic. He got top grades because of who his father was. His first major roles were to be appointed both the head of the Iraqi Football Association and the Iraqi Olympic Committee in 1984, when he was 21 years old. And he'd actually formed his own football club the year before. He would use his position at the FA to transform Al Rashid into Iraq's most successful club, learning ruthless techniques he would employ elsewhere. Iraq's best players, including Ahmed Radi and Habib Jafar, were forced to sign for the club. Some were beaten if they refused. Others were simply kidnapped from their clubs and driven to Al Rashid Stadium. And Uday ordered players to be beaten if they underperformed, acts that would get more brutal as the years went on. He would even order the detention and torture of sports journalists who would be sent to the infamous El Marwaniya prison if they were less than complimentary about Al Rashid. When Iraq qualified for its only World Cup, Mexico '86, Uday was intimately involved in choosing the opponents of warm-up matches, changing the kit to gold at the last minute, and threatening punishment if they didn't win it. Iraq lost all 3 games. Head shaving was a popular form of punishment. I loved Kevin Keegan. He was my best player, and I had a perm like him, said Ahmed Rahim Hamad, a striker in that 1986 squad. Uday shaved everybody's hair. That's when I lost my perm. Uday had originally been Saddam's anointed successor, but he was becoming increasingly unhinged, especially in his treatment of women who he would kidnap, abuse, and murder. The final straw for his father came in 1988 when he drunkenly murdered Saddam's personal valet at a party held in honor of the wife of former Egyptian leader Hosni Mubarak. Saddam had Uday jailed and then exiled to Switzerland. He then dissolved Al Rashid in 1990 as the team had now become a hated symbol of Uday and the regime. But the same year, the first Gulf War began. International sanctions were imposed and Iraq's isolation began. But Uday thrived, making millions from smuggling operations and extorting football players' wages. Former Iraqi captain Habib Jafar, who'd been beaten with cables and forced to jump into vats of raw sewage following bad results, was now forced to hand over 40% of his earnings to Uday when he signed a contract with the Qatari club. Somehow, in 1993, Iraq had made it to the final qualification round for the '94 World Cup, the first finals to be held in the US. The final round would take place in Qatar. 6 teams would play in a round robin for 2 places. But the problem was that 3 of those teams were Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, all 3 under international sanctions, who viewed the US as a mortal enemy. The thought of Uday Hussein swanning around the US terrified the organizers. The State Department sent an observer to keep an eye on things as the tournament progressed, and FIFA put together a crack team of top European referees to officiate. Ultimately, all 3 failed to make it, and the Iraqi FA accused US intelligence and FIFA of colluding to stop Iraq from qualifying. Then President Sepp Blatter denied it, later saying that he had a personal letter signed by then US President Bill Clinton that any team that qualified would be allowed in. But Uday didn't blame US intelligence. He blamed the players, arresting some and torturing others. The players were made to conduct training with a concrete football as punishment. The following year, Uday set up the Fedayeen Saddam, a feared paramilitary organization devoted to crushing internal opposition to Saddam. The Fedayeen wore all black to intimidate the enemy. Their helmets were modeled on Darth Vader's in Star Wars, a film that Uday loved. One of the helmets is on display at the Imperial War Museum. But Uday's wings were clipped again in 1996, following an assassination attempt in Baghdad that left him unable to walk, and to some reports, impotent. He would regain some of his movement, enough to continue ordering the torture of sportsmen and women over the next 6 years. Even FIFA launched an investigation in 1997, sending 2 officials to Iraq to investigate claims that players were tortured after they lost a World Cup qualification match for France '98 against Kazakhstan. FIFA said they found no evidence, a claim that was later ridiculed. Did they think a player inside Iraq has the guts and capability to talk against Uday? Said Emtifad Kambar of the US-based Iraqi National Congress, who would later wholeheartedly support George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq. That's like going to the streets of Chicago in the 1930s and asking the shop owners, do you like Al Capone? The IOC didn't do anything either, claiming it had not received any complaints of torture until 3 months before the March 2003 invasion. But the torture chambers found at Iraq's Olympic HQ proved otherwise. And on July the 22nd, 2003, it all came to an end. Uday and his brother Qusay were hiding in the mansion of a businessman and ally of their fathers in the northern city of Mosul, seeking the $30 million reward on offer by the US military for information that led to them. Their host betrayed them. US Special Forces stormed the compound and reduced it to rubble with attack helicopters and anti-tank missiles. The brothers were dead, and Uday Hussein's reign of terror